Hi, I'm Supervisor George Homan, and welcome to another edition of Hometown Happenings. Before we get to our guests for this show, I'd like to talk about just a couple of things that we have going on in Clarkstown. As summer's drawing to a conclusion, we're working diligently to continue to provide additional access to all of our services within Clarkstown. I'm delighted that by now you may have seen some of our town board meetings that are now being broadcast for the first time. Those shows will be airing on Thursday evenings on our public access channel. And we're looking forward to our upcoming fall events that will be taking place, including our efforts at Coffee with the Supervisor and our next teletown hall meeting that we'll be running in September. Finally, as we get preparing for the 15th anniversary of 9/11, construction is drawing to a conclusion on the work that we're doing on our 9/11 memorial outside of Town Hall. And please stay tuned for the details about our 9/11 event, which we're very excited. We'll have a brand new and beautiful memorial to commemorate those who were lost on that tragic day. On today's show, I'm very happy that we have Cecilia Halverson, the Executive Director of Homemaids of Rockland, who will talk about the growing need for home care within our community. She'll be followed by Colonel John Layton, a decorated Vietnam veteran, who will talk about the Joseph P. Dwyer Peer Mentoring Program. And we close out our program with a segment with our town clerk, Justin Sweet. And all that on this edition of Hometown Happenings. Stay tuned. And thank you for joining me for this edition of Hometown Happenings. My first guest today is Cecilia Halverson, the Executive Director of Homemaids of Rockland. Welcome, Cecilia.
Hi, George. Thanks so much for inviting me to talk with you today.
So, Cecilia, I'm delighted to have you on the program. I've known you for very many years. You run a very dynamic not-for-profit, Homemaids of Rockland, that's located right here in New City. Before we get to Homemaids and some of the important programs that you have for people with disabilities and seniors, really wanted to maybe talk a little bit about your own personal background. Maybe you could talk a little bit for our viewers about what brought you into the field and where you're from.
Sure, I'd love to. I am a native New Yorker, although I did not grow up in Rockland County. I grew up in New York City and made my way here as a young adult with a stop in Westchester for a time period. And as a young married couple, my husband and I discovered that Westchester was out of our financial grasp. And we ended up in Rockland, and we're really fortunate. It's such a beautiful place, and we've lived here for, let's see, my oldest son is 31, so we've lived here for 30 years. And I am actually a psychologist. And my focus in psychology was young adolescents. So how I ended up working with older adults is just one of those things that happens. And I really love the population that we work with. I remember when I first came to Homemaids of Rockland, I was a little surprised at some of the conversations that the nurses would have after they came back from opening a case, and they would talk about how cute a client was. And I thought, really, those kinds of comments are usually reserved for children. But our clients are just the most wonderful, loving people. And I came to embrace the population as one that I am so happy to work with, and can't see myself working with anyone else. I came to the county. I've worked in not-for-profit management since I was in graduate school. I worked in the areas of literacy and counseling. I worked for a while at what's now known as VCS, but was Volunteer Counseling Service, and ended up at Homemaids of Rockland about 14 years ago, and worked with Celia Juris, following Patricia Ferreira, and here I am in the chair.
Right. So maybe you could talk a little bit about Homemaids of Rockland,
Sure.
What your key mission is, and some of the important work that you do.
Well, the goal of home care in general is to maintain whoever needs the service at the highest quality of life in their home and out of institutional settings. Now, in Rockland County, we have a very large older population, rapidly growing. And so the bulk of our clients are people who are older. The average age of our clients hovers around 87, 88. So that gives you an idea that there are actually more than a handful at this point that are over 100 years old.
Wow.
And so we're dealing with a population that is vulnerable and frail, and probably has multiple chronic conditions. So the goal is to manage this in a way that doesn't necessarily cure them, because we're not talking about cure, but helps to maintain them in a way that is comfortable and known to them safely in their own home, which is where most of us want to be as we get older. Very few people want to sign up for a nursing home unless it's what's appropriate.
Right. So how many folks do you guys take care of and provide services for?
It varies, and it fluctuates up and down. Our roster is anywhere from 75 to 120. It depends. You know, some people get service every day. Some people need some assistance every morning to get their day started, to be at their very best. And some people just need a little bit of help. You know, somebody to go in once a week for 4 hours and help them maintain a sanitary home environment, to do a little shopping, a little cooking. And so there's really the whole gamut. And certainly we have clients that need 24-hour round-the-clock care. They're at a stage of life where they want to be home, but they really need some safety supervision, and they need somebody to address their needs if they wake up in the middle of the night. So, and that describes pretty much the entire adult population of Rockland County.
Right. So, you know, I know there's been a lot of changes with the Affordable Care Act
Yes,
in the last number of years.
Yeah.
And really the goal is to try and maintain people in the community. There's really been this whole move away from people being institutionalized, and really kind of the move away from people spending lengthy periods of time in the hospital.
Correct.
Hospital stays are shorter. Stays within nursing homes and rehab facilities are much shorter. And home care is really playing a much larger
Absolutely.
role. How do you view home aides in this changing climate with healthcare, and really kind of what's your vision for the agency going forward?
You know, home care is very important in that transition between hospital and home, or between rehabilitation center and home. And it certainly does help to maintain the person in a status where there's not going to be a readmission. And home care's role, in addition to helping ease that transition, is to really educate both the patient and the family caregivers. Because remember, home care is not 100% of the care. There are family members involved most of the time. And so home care really, when it's done right, it's patient-centered, but it's also focusing on the entire family, and that is a support system. The Affordable Care Act has had impacts, some good, some maybe not so good. But as people strive to stay home, home care is expanding. Certainly in Rockland County, the number of licensed home care agencies is growing by leaps and bounds. And so it's absolutely here to stay. And it's one of the most significant players, I think, in keeping people home and safe in the community.
It's also, from I guess a budgetary perspective as well.
Yes.
It's far cheaper to maintain somebody within their home environment, bringing in highly skilled, well-trained,
Right.
And competent home aides and home attendants and home care nurses to be able to maintain a person in the community, as opposed to having them go out to a rehab facility or an institutional type setting.
Right. Well, you know, care is managed by long-term care facilities, or really insurance companies. And there are quite a number of Medicaid managed long-term care companies that are both located and providing service in Rockland County and all over the state. But there are also people who don't qualify for those services. And in Rockland County, that's a lot of people. Their incomes are slightly too high to qualify for services that are supported by taxpayers. And yet, as elderly people on fixed incomes, it's very difficult for them to get the care that they need. So Homemades of Rockland really occupies a very special niche. We, as a not-for-profit home care agency, we're able to grant, seek, and fundraise so that we can support those very people in our community. Very often people who have lived here their entire lives, raised their families, their grandchildren, and without our support to help them stay in their home through the reduced rate home care program, they would be going to nursing homes. So Homemades of Rockland is really a very unique home care agency, and I think Rockland County is very fortunate to have us here.
Oh, absolutely, and I think you hit the key point. You're one of the few home care agencies that's really a not-for-profit agency. Many home care agencies are for-profit entities, and you're a not-for-profit agency, so you've got a dedicated group of volunteers for your board. You do some fundraising. I typically go to your annual dinner every year, and that makes it a special and unique place,
Right.
Different from most of the other home care agencies that are out there because you are a not-for-profit.
Right. And because we have no owners, there's nobody who's looking for the profitability as the goal of the organization. Our goal is the person that's receiving the care to provide the best care possible. And if it's okay, I just wanted to mention a fundraiser that we do. Every year we create this directory of products and services for elders and family caregivers. And this is a very useful tool for people in our community to identify quickly a product or service that's locally based that can support them as they care for somebody. And it also serves as a fundraiser. The advertising fees support our reduced rate home care program. So it's a great tool for the community, and it's something that we do. I think this might be the 4th year that we're doing it. We're thrilled that we've received so much support from the community.
So it's really a resource guide in
Exactly.
so many ways with a listing of companies and businesses and resources for people within the community that really can use it.
And we have a website. Anybody wants one of these, they can download it at no cost.
Right.
And
So we're just about out of time, but maybe you could give your contact information.
Sure.
If people are looking for assistance, some of the things that they might need help with, and questions, they need somebody to come in and help their mother or their father, or grandma, grandpa, or a family member, whatever it might be, short-term, long-term. So how do they get in touch with you, and maybe a little bit about your website?
we can be accessed by phone. 845-634-2024, which is how we receive a lot of our inquiries after someone has gone to our website. So these days, people are doing, an internet search. And when we ask people how they heard about us, it was the internet. We have a really good website, and we tend to be right up there at the top when people do a Google search, which is great. And they read all about us. They can actually fill out a contact form right on the website, or they can call us, as many people do, because this is a little scary, having somebody who's a stranger come into your home. Home health aides are often referred to as intimate strangers, and it's just such an accurate term. And so we spend a lot of time on the phone trying to understand exactly what the needs are and counseling the person on the other end of the phone. We do a lot of information and referral, and our nurses are very willing to help. So really, it starts with a phone call, and then the nurse, where we think it's going to be an appropriate situation, the nurse goes out and makes an on-site visit, and it all goes from that.
Right. And your website addresses?
Our website is HomeAids, HomeAides.org.
Great. Well, Cecilia, again, I've enjoyed working with you throughout the years. I'd spent 21 years in not-for-profit work, and I had worked collaboratively with you through a number of those years at a variety of agencies. So delighted you were able to join me, and really thankful to have gotten to know you throughout the years. That you run a really tight ship and with a great organization.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and for this opportunity to talk about what I think is an asset to the community, Homemades of Rockland. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
our next guest will be John Layton, a Vietnam veteran, who will be talking about his exploits. And again, thank you, Cecilia.
You're very welcome. Thanks. It's been great.
And welcome back. My next guest is Colonel John Layton, a Vietnam veteran who is very involved with the Vet-to-Vet program. Thank you, Colonel, for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, George. I appreciate being here.
You know, Colonel, I've known you over the last number of years when I had been at Rockland Independent Living Center, and some of the work that you're doing with the Joseph P. Dwyer peer-to-peer veteran mentoring program. And we'll talk about that towards the end of this segment. But you would like to talk a little bit about your service, distinguished career in service in Vietnam, and we thank you for that service. And before we get to that, maybe you could talk just a little bit about yourself personally, where you're from. I know you don't have a New York accent.
No, every once in a while I go back to my home state of Maine just to make sure that I still have that accent, and I do. But I grew up in Portland, Maine, and then I was in sales and marketing most of my career. We've moved several times. This is my 6th house here in Congers, where I live, and we've been there for 25 years with my wife. We have 6 children, and we're proud of our kids, and we're happy living here in Clarkstown. Great town, great town. So militarily, I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1964. I spent 2.5 years as an enlisted man, and then was selected for Marine OCS, graduated from OCS as a 2nd lieutenant, and was selected for flight school, which is at Navy Pensacola. I flew fixed wing and helicopters in training, and upon graduation I was assigned to a helicopter squadron in New River, North Carolina, and subsequently deployed to Vietnam in February of 1968. There I spent 13 months flying helicopters, various missions, troop inserts, troop extracts, recon inserts, recon extracts, and logistics missions. But probably my most satisfying missions were always the medevac missions, whether they were day or night. At night they were pretty dangerous, but nonetheless, it always gave me a feeling that we were helping our troops. The Marine Corps is a team, air-ground team, and so as a result, the medevac missions were always the highlight in my mind of my career in Vietnam. When we came back, I spent another 1.5 years on active duty as a flight instructor and as a maintenance test pilot, and then transferred to the reserves. And strangely enough, I was flying out of Boston, Mass for a number of years, and ultimately ended up in Norfolk, Virginia, where ultimately I was the commanding officer of the squadron, finally was promoted to full colonel, and then I retired. So, and quite honestly, until I retired from business, I really wasn't very involved, with the exception of the reserves, in veterans activities. But coming here, once I retired, I felt I wanted to be with some of my fellow Marines, vets, or just and some of the Vietnam vets. So I'm a member of the Marine Corps League, past commandant, member of the Vietnam Veterans Organization here, past president, member of the American Legion Post, and I just recently joined the Disabled American Vets. So, not that I'm disabled, but you can belong, and I decided I'd belong.
So you've had a rather full career. Maybe just jumping back, Colonel, a little bit about your service in Vietnam. But, you were there during probably one of the hotter parts of the war, and maybe you could talk a little bit about some of your experiences. I'm sure you had some close calls.
Well, I got there in February, and I was in a place called Phu Bai, which is just south of Hue, and if you know your history, Hue was under severe attack, was surrounded and actually occupied by North Vietnamese regular troops. And on my second mission, which was my first combat mission, we were resupplying the Marines in Hue at the Citadel, and unfortunately, I became a good target, and the aircraft was shot down. And the good news was we were able to be rescued within 5 minutes, because otherwise we probably would be in a different location. So we were able to be rescued, and we went back to, we were able to be taken back to Phu Bai. And then, look, that's the way it is. The next thing is we're flying into Khe Sanh during the siege, and that was probably as close to a World War II environment as you would see in Vietnam. We have a friend, Barry Fixler, who was the jeweler. He spent 77 days on the ground. I had moments of terror. He had days of terror. Right. From that, I flew, as I said in the introduction, a variety of missions, flew off a carrier, but always flying the same missions in Vietnam. I was shot down one more time, and again, fortunately, we were able to be rescued in a very short period of time. Let me say this, as a helicopter pilot, I always say, that's a great thing. Yes, but the real, let me say, the real heroes and the real people that did the work were the crew chiefs and the door gunners and the corpsmen. The corpsmen, when we'd fly medevac, often when we would land under fire, would leave the helicopter and help bring the medevacs into the aircraft. I always just hoped they'd be as fast as possible. But those were the people that really, they're my heroes. Okay, and that's basically it.
Well, I mean, you're very modest about your service. Shot down twice, and really in the heat of the war. There was some very difficult days, and that time, '68, over in service in Vietnam, and we thank you for your service. Okay. But you've brought your career now as a retired, and distinguished veteran. You have a whole nother level of service that you're bringing, forward that we really want to kind of talk about. The Joseph P. Dwyer Veteran Program. I know that's important to you. It's a program that I had the privilege of kind of bringing it from the county over to the former agency that I had been with, Rockland Independent Living Center, and really it's a peer-to-peer veteran mentoring program. Maybe you could speak a little bit about the Joseph Dwyer program and how important it is for veterans. And
by the way, you did a great job getting that program into Rockland Independent Living Center because the Rockland Independent Living Center provides other services beyond just the mentoring, which helps in the whole program. So, I thank you, and the veterans thank you for that. The program, if I can go back to its origin, Joseph P. Dwyer was an Army medic. He was a PFC, and he was in Iraq. And during a firefight, a battle, he is seen carrying a small child across the battlefield to safety. And ironically, at that time, there was a photojournalist there who took this picture of PFC Dwyer carrying this small child, and it got published nationally. Joseph came back to the United States, and over a period of time, 3 or 4 years, just could not settle down. And I suspect that one of the things that bothered him was he was singled out in this event, but he knew that his comrades were doing similar things. And there is always some guilt sometimes that are associated with this. Well, unfortunately, he fell into using drugs, using alcohol to kind of assuage his problems, ultimately committed suicide. His family lives in, his parents live in Long Island, and they petitioned senators within the state to start a program. We know statistically that between 22, 23 veterans commit suicide every day. And so the primary objective of the Dwyer Vet-to-Vet program is mentoring to maybe alleviate some of the concerns, some of the emotions that a returning veteran might have by talking with another veteran who has had similar experience. That doesn't mean that every veteran out there is thinking about committing suicide, but unfortunately, we've had some in the county and throughout the United States. One of the things that I find, and what we try to do with the Vet-to-Vet program, is to match up a veteran from a particular theater, such as Iraq or Afghanistan, with another veteran, or in my case, a Vietnam veteran with another veteran. And we spend a lot of time on the Iraqi veterans, but the Vietnam veterans who have basically, most have retired, if they don't have a lot to keep them busy, they start thinking about what was.
Right.
And so I have a couple of Vietnam veterans who I consider good friends that you will have a cup of coffee with, and quite honestly, it's more listening. The program also has a 15-hour military behavioral course put on through the Institute of Medicine that is done by Alan Hirschman, who is a PhD clinical psychologist and a retired colonel from, I think, the National Guard. He does a great job. So when we're sitting with another veteran, it isn't like we don't know anything about it. We're looking for certain things. We're listening. The listening aspect is probably the most important part. And if we can utilize some of the services from Rockland Independent Living, such as job creation or entrepreneurship, we'll try to lead them that way. And quite honestly, to that event, they have established a coffee shop called the Independent Cafe, which is in the courthouse up the street, in which veterans that didn't have jobs now have jobs, and they're doing a great job, and they feel good about themselves.
Right.
One of the other things of note is we work with Rockland Community College. We work with Jonathan Barnwell, who is the Director of Veteran Affairs over there. And in fact, and I'll give them a plug, in October, they're going to do what is called Run the Rock, which is going to be sponsored by Rockland Independent Living Center through the Dwyer program, and to raise some money, and that money will go to the Veterans Affairs Department in RCC, and will also go to the Dwyer program to help us continue to promote this. Somebody said, well, why do you think this program works for veterans? Well, interestingly enough, just recently a book was published by Sebastian Junger. He's the fellow that wrote Perfect Storm. And he wrote this book called Tribe, Welcome Home and Beyond. And it was an anthropological look at communities. And he was using Indian tribes as the example that were very tight-knit. Well, if you take that and now you apply it to the veteran, who let's say is in Iraq or Afghanistan, or in my case, Vietnam, You're in crisis situations an awful lot, and you become very tight with your comrades because your very life depends on it. And you're doing important things.
Mm-hmm.
You come back now to the United States. Unlike when I came back to from Vietnam, there was a lot of hate and discontent. The good news is everybody thanks the vet today for their services. The bad news is, for the most part, they don't understand the vet. And the vet doesn't understand the civilian life. It's a huge adjustment from that. And so, because only 1% of our population is now serving in the service.
Right.
So when a veteran has an opportunity to sit down with another veteran and just talk about whatever he wants to talk about, I believe it's a win-win for both parties. In other words, when I'm sitting down having a cup of coffee with a fellow veteran, and we're just talking, we may not talk about anything. We might talk about the drought that's going on right now, or we may talk about some of the battles. And as a helicopter pilot, I got to be in a lot of places in northern South Vietnam, so I'm familiar with most areas. And that's a comfort factor to the other veteran, and hopefully they feel good when we're done for the day or for the morning, and I feel good.
Right.
Okay.
So we're about out of time, but I do want to give contact information if you could provide it. If somebody wants to learn more about the Dwyer program, and if they could, and how one becomes a mentor, for the Dwyer program. I know that they have, particularly they're looking for vets, vet to vet,
Right.
but there's also some non-vets that will take the training as well.
We do have some non-vets. We have some therapists and some professionals that take that. The other thing that I failed to mention is that we have an advisory committee.
Right.
And the advisory committee is made up of veterans from every veteran organization in the county. And that's a very important function because, first of all, they are in regular contact with their members, and they can bring to us ideas, thoughts, and so forth. And we can also use them in our outreach program. Getting a veteran to say, I really got a little problem, is a very tough proposition. In some cases, I have a veteran from Iraq who said, basically, I'm okay, I don't have any problems, I just, I think I'll talk to you for one day. A month later, he called me up and he said, can we have coffee? And he quite frankly probably has other issues, but at least he knows that another veteran is concerned and cares,
Right.
and he's not alone. So people can call me, and I'm going to give you, my wife says don't ever do that, but I'll give you my cell phone number, which is the best contact if they want to talk to me, and it's 845-521-5361. They can also call Rockland Independent Living, ask for Lorraine.
And that number is 845-624-1366.
You know it better than I do.
I still remember it.
Or if they're going to our Veteran Service Officer, Jerry Donnellan, he can forward it on to us. Now, he is not allowed to give out names, which is part of like HIPAA and so forth, but he can recommend that they call us. The other thing I should mention is that between the Joseph Dwyer program, which is sponsored by Rockland Independent Living, and the Marine Corps League, we sponsor the Rock Vet Show. And so we bought a couple of years of time for Jerry because Jerry's a very good guy, very, very knowledgeable in Veterans Affairs, and he has a show once a month.
Right.
So, there are a lot of things that we're trying to do. We'll have an advisory meeting coming up in August. And then I think the formal training, which is very important, will probably begin in September. The last one ended in June, which was up at West Point. And I'm not sure where the next one's going to be held. Alan Hirschman will probably make that determination. But I would invite anybody, whether you're a civilian or a vet, contact us. Come